I'm Earl Cox in Jerusalem, Israel's capital. I'm standing here today at Mount Herzl, Israel's national cemetery, located on the west side of Jerusalem. This sacred place is 25 acres of soil filled with the bones of young Israelis killed in the building and defense of the State of Israel. All the graves are uniform, regardless of rank or distinction, because Israel respects and values all life equally. Here in Mount Herzl, there's also a garden for the missing soldier, which commemorates those lost at sea and those missing in action. An annual memorial service takes place here each year on the 7th of Adar, which is the day the Hebrew calendar marks as the traditional date of the death of Moses, whose body and grave is known only to God. Who would be better today to talk with me about the many brave Israeli men and women who have fought and lived and fought and died for Israel than Daniel Seaman, who is the former Director General of the Israeli Press Office, the spokesperson for the Prime Minister, and a former IDF paratrooper. Director General Seaman, how do you differentiate between Mount Herzl and other cemeteries that you've been to?
Well, of course, this is the most meaningful cemetery in Israel, if you can call it that, considering we are in Jerusalem and you have the Mount of Olives, etc. But for the rebirth of the State of Israel, this is very significant, because here we have the gravesite of the person who prophesies, a modern-day prophet. We're not talking about biblical. And those who question the biblical authenticity, all you have to look at this modern-day prophet who envisioned the recreation, the rebirth of the Jewish people in their ancient homeland. And it happened, and that's why here all the greatest people of of our people in the second half of the 20th century and the 21st century are buried here. And this is to recognize the vision of Herzl.
Director General, as I recollect, I believe I heard it from somewhere that Theodore Herzl made some prophecies, made some predictions, prognostications about things that would be happening in the future. Have any of them come true?
Well, not only has it all come true, and many people doubted it. Remember, for 2,000 years, Jews had wanted to come back, but they were expecting something on biblical proportions, such as the crossing of the Red Sea. It doesn't always have to be so dramatic. In this case, the drama was one individual who was not religious, who envisioned this and said how Jews can come back. And he had a book called Alt Neuland, the Old New Land, in which the old land would be reestablished, and Jews would come from all over the world. And that happened, just as he said, and we would establish a modern-day country here. And if you look at Israel today, 70 years after the creation of the state, over 100 years after his death, you can see that we've gone with his vision, and like we always do, we've taken it one step forward and further.
As a former IDF paratrooper, many of your friends are probably buried here. But again, I'm going back, how do you differentiate between being here and right in front of this memorial where Theodore Herzl was? It has to be something very special when you come here. So solemn.
Well, that's the whole thing. It does have that strength of you see this and you realize that we can't take anything for granted. And being in the state of Israel means sacrifice. These people who are buried here made the ultimate sacrifice. But with him, you realize that it could have been very different. Jews were persecuted for 2,000 years. We didn't have the ability to stand up and defend ourselves. For me, more than anything else, I have 4 young children. Our children, born today, were no longer defenseless, are no longer helpless. We can defend ourselves, sometimes at a very high price, at a very painful price. But that price is better than anything we went through over 2,000 years.
Unlike America, where young people graduate from high school and go on to college, here in Israel, it's not the case. You join the IDF or the Border Patrol, and how was it for you?
It was obvious, and it's a great privilege. It's an enormous honor to serve your country, to be able to do things that for 2,000 years Jews were not able to do. And remember, we are the descendants of the great warriors.
King David.
King David was a great warrior. You had all the warriors of the Bible, Barak and Devorah, the prophet. And we are descendants. Gideon, we are descendants to the Maccabeans, to the Hasmoneans. And finally, after 2,000 years, we can restore that element of our Judaism and be able to fight for ourselves, defend our country, and fight for our future. And as we see, our future is tremendous.
Well, one thing we Christians know, that the Jewish people are the apple of God's eye.
Well, sometimes I don't know. Yeah, because it's a huge honor. And I think sometimes, and you know me, I'm not a religious person, but you have to question things when you see the amazing things we're capable of doing here. And it's against all odds. This is a country that has absorbed millions of refugees. Nobody talks about them because we resolved that situation. This is a country that faces innumerable enemies, terrorism, and yet it's a flourishing country, a wonderful country, a country that Jews, Christians, Muslims all live together. We are the ultimate multiracial society that proves it can work. It's not always perfect, but compared to other places in the world and considering the situation we're in, we're doing a fantastic job. So sometimes I ask myself, against all odds, there has to be some kind of divine intervention or somebody watching over us and making sure that his promise is kept. And we are living the prophecy today.
You may not be religious, but you believe the same thing we do.
I tell you, I do. And the more you live here and the more you see what is happening in the state of Israel, you have no other choice. You have to believe. It's not only Ben-Gurion said you have to believe in miracles. I think it's beyond miracles. There is something, you can feel God's hand when you live in the state of Israel. You can feel it in every fiber of your being, in every fiber of your body. And when you come here, you understand, yes, there may be a price to pay. You may have to fight for it. But God is with us, and that gives it's a tremendous honor and responsibility.
Danny Seaman, former spokesperson for the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. This has been a special report from Jerusalem, Israel's capital. For the Christian Coalition, I'm Earl Cox in Israel.